Chapter 6. Sex and Collapse.
Okay, wakey, people.
Miyagi chuckles at the overused permascape joke.
Q&A time. I want to hear your thoughts, especially...
He waves a finger across the section of the amphitheater where Jimena's fellow GIA students sit.
From our new friends from the New World. You people are being way too shy. Shoot.
A few hands raise, but none of them from GIA students. Miyagi ignores them and keeps his smile locked at the sea of white and blue robes. Finally, a brave hand rises slowly.
Great. Cody.
Jimena knows Cody O'Higgin well. He's in one of her classes. Smart guy, ambitious, and always a kind soul.
Please, go ahead.
Cody stands.
Thank you, Professor. Sorry if the question is a bit, superficial, but I was wondering how old Eda Fandola and Aline Spies were in the sections we just watched.
Good question, Cody. People, don't be shy about your questions, all right? There are no boring questions, nor stupid questions. It is the wildest thoughts that usually start the most fascinating discussions. Now, to your question. They were both 16, but don't be fooled by their youth. A century ago, when a person reached your age...
He drives a finger across his audience, most in their upper 20s.
They would have accomplished a basic education, learned and perfected their family profession, ordered 2 babies at Oz womb, led a family as an elder, and died.
He paces the stage in silence to let that sink in. Jimena is 27 herself. She would have been killed already if she were born 4 generations ago. Goa, how did they manage? There was no time to pursue any meaningful life project. She wonders, perhaps they were indeed happy while it lasted. Free of the worries of career and uncertainty.
A person entered adulthood at 10.
Miyagi continues.
As they reached sexual maturity. Fun fact. Did you know that at the end of the Golden Age, right before the first collapse of the 2080s, humans matured at least 2 or 3 years later than we do now? Yes. An unexpected side effect of the damn pandemic of the 22nd century was the natural selection of humans with ever earlier sexual maturity. Can anybody guess why?
Jimena scoffs. It's obvious. But nobody raises a hand.
Go ahead, Jimena, Mark says. Answer that.
Jimena shakes her head, blushing. Oh, she hates her compulsive blushing. Even in dreams, she cannot control it. Mark grabs her hand and raises it shamelessly.
Here, Professor,
he yells.
Please.
He points his finger at Jimena and reads the names that pop up over her head.
Oh, Ipulin. So happy to have you in this seminar. Loved your take on raw power in that post-Columbian paper you published. People, this is Jimena Ipulin, a sharp mind.
Jimena's cheeks are on fire. She tries to smile and fails.
I would like a word in private after the seminar, if you don't mind.
With me?
Yeah. There is something I stumbled on during my research that might interest you. But more of that later.
Miyagi turns his face to the stupefied students. Even Mark looks at Jimena like she had just turned into crystal.
This seminar is not just an academic event, people,
Miyagi says.
The global program is first and foremost an intercultural exchange.
He claps at Jimena.
Bravo! You totally embraced the spirit by sitting with the Lundev gang. You should all heed Jimena's example and mix more, people. Now, Jimena, please answer the question. Why the selective pressure for earlier sexual maturity?
Jimena clears her throat. Twice. Yes, Professor. Before that, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but the truth is that I arrived late, and this was the only free spot.
Really?
Miyagi laughs, together with most of the students. Oh, Goa, Jimena thinks. Ground swallow me up.
Well,
Miyagi nods at her in appreciation.
I have to apologize then. I didn't want to put you on the spot. Love your honesty, though. Perhaps the most important trait of a historian. Now, your take on the sexual selection.
Yes, Professor. Jimena clears her throat again. The selective pressure began in the 2080s. As the first collapse gained traction, more than 1 billion people were killed in a single generation.
Tell us about that, Jimena. What killed them?
She raises her thumb in the air. The immediate cause was the environmental breakdown, especially in the tropics, which then... She raises her index finger as she counts on. Precipitated famines and migration waves like never seen since antiquity. That, in turn, she raises a third finger. Wrecked the global and national networks of trade. Another finger. Collapsing country after country into smaller nativist grouplets. And the cycle repeated. More famine. She keeps raising finger after finger. More xenophobic massacres, more splitting into even smaller groups. And on went the first collapse, killing millions upon millions of people.
So you're saying, Miyagi asks, that it was the higher mortality that created evolutionary pressure for earlier sexual maturity?
No, not the higher mortality, rather the earlier mortality. Miyagi smiles.
Please clarify.
Yes, Professor. It was the DEM pandemic, of course. Dementia furiosa has always been killing people, even before the first collapse. But it has always been in a relatively small scale, and only affected the most elderly. But all that changed with the high mortality of the first collapse.
How so?
The more people died in the first collapse, the higher the proportion of dementia furiosa that affected the elderly. Nobody knew why back then, but soon everybody over 80 perished from DEM, which then began spreading through those in their late 70s. And when they, in turn, were dead, DEM began to ravage those in their mid-70s, and so on it went, killing the oldest humans alive, and killing ever younger, mostly hidden from the public view behind the curtain of the horrors of the first collapse, until, at some point, there were no elderly left in the world, and DEM kept killing on and on relentlessly.
Can you give us some numbers?
Not from the top of my head. Sorry, Professor. I only know what everybody knows.
That the human lifespan shrunk rapidly during the 22nd century.
I'll give you some numbers, people.
Miyagi paces the stage while speaking.
Lifespans went down from 60 years in 2100 to 45 in 2120. Can you picture what that does to a civilization? And it didn't stop there. Dem kept ravaging the oldest layers of society, decade after decade. The second collapse, indeed. Billions die as the fabric of society dissolves simultaneously worldwide. First go the nation-states, then the cities and towns, then even the timeless institutions of tribe and family begin to falter. Which brings us to one of the key human adaptations that allowed us to survive.
He turns and points at Jimena.
Which is...
Jimena clears her throat. Earlier sexual maturity. Miyagi nods and keeps his gaze locked on her.
Oh, Goa.
Yes. Just natural selection at work, Professor. Shorter lifespans create pressure on the reproductive cycle. Earlier breeders have higher chances to pass their genes to the next generation. So, after a few generations, She clears her throat again.
Perfect. Thank you, Jimena.
She sits and draws a deep breath.
Well done,
Mark whispers with playful tone.
but you gotta work on that thing you do with your hands while...
Oh, shut up, she says, and mocks a slap on his shoulder. Miyagi is pointing at a pretty South Asian Loon-Deaf student that is raising her hand insistently on the front bench.
Yes, Sky.
She is frowning. Makes little sense, sorry, Professor. Even with all that dying, there were still a few million survivors.
You are right. Most of them in North America. About 50 million. Where Townsend was already spreading the gift of Goa. But there were only 50 or 60 left in the rest of the world combined.
Still, Sky spread her hands. Plenty of people to keep civilization running, I would think. That's what I don't get. Even if everybody dies young, so what? All our knowledge and technology, it doesn't disappear from one day to the next.
That,
Miyagi points at her,
is a great question. Nice, Sky. Anybody care to... Cody. Great. Happy to see our Townsend University friends more active. Keep it up. What do you have to say to Sky?
With all due respect to my esteemed fellow,
Cody says with slow, studious tone.
What good is a quantum field theory manual to a farmer that can barely read?
Oh, come on, Gia, Sky says with an exaggerated roll of the eyes. Not all remaining millions are farmers that can barely read. Jimena doesn't like her tone. Cody's kind expression remains stoically unmoved by Sky's reply. Always the attentive debater, Jimena has seen him in action before.
I'm sorry if my metaphor was too simplistic, he continues. My fault entirely. In my haste to make an obvious point, I wrongly assumed a hint would be enough.
Jimena smiles. Touché. What are you saying? Sky stands and points a finger at him.
Are you calling me a people?
Miyagi raises his hands and tone.
Come on, keep it civilized and respectful. Discuss away, but no name calling. Sky, sit down, please. Thank you. Cody, please, no more metaphors nor, hints. Tell us in simple, everyday words why the radically shorter lifespans destroyed the sophisticated civilizations of the Golden Age.
Apologies, Professor. Sky. He bows at her with convincing humility. I did not intend disrespect. Jimena chuckles. She knows him better. To find the truth, I believe we need to take a step back from them, the collapse, the great dying, and ask ourselves the proper questions.
I like how you think.
Miyagi is nodding at him.
Finding the right questions is a cornerstone of science. Often harder than finding the answers. So, tell us, which questions are relevant to the second collapse?
The key question, I believe, is what makes a civilization? He pauses a second. And the answer, in my humble opinion, is not knowledge nor technology, not directly. He hastily adds, as Sky seems about to say something. The answer is specialists.
Specialists?
Miyagi says, squinting eyes staring at Cody. Jimena throws a glance down to the front bench, where Sky seems to scoff.
Yes, quite right,
Miyagi says.
The more complex the civilization, the more specialized we all become.
Yes, professors, doctors, engineers, scientists, botanists, analysts, merchants, financiers.
Don't forget historians,
Miyagi adds with a chuckle.
Each splitting into dozens of more concrete specializations. My best friend is a solar energy automation engineer, specialized on near-Earth habitat structures.
Yes, Professor, Cody says, his kind smile broadening. Great example. Now that we have a candidate answer, specialists, to the key question, what makes civilization? We can postulate the impact of them killing at ever younger ages. Jimena is mildly jealous of Cody's ability to remain calm and well-paced. The whole auditorium is staring at him, and many, like Sky, even with suspicion, if not open disdain. He just doesn't care. Put simply, he continues through that perennial smile of his. Specialists died, one by one, together with their experience and wisdom, until all that was left were ignorant kids. Take your friend, for example, Professor. What would happen to our space habitats if specialists like him died from them without replacement? Yes, as my esteemed fellow Sky rightly points out, he extends a hand in her direction. Human knowledge persists, but, alas, only on paper and digital storage.
And what good is that knowledge?
Miyagi says.
If nobody has enough time to absorb it, right? Great answer, Cody. Thanks. Love this discussion. You began by asking how old Edda was in the sequence we observed, and ended discussing the ravages on humanity of the second collapse. Only by the outset of the 23rd century did lifespans finally stabilize at 27, and so it remained unchanged until the early 25th century, the fascinating times which we are studying in this seminar, when that stability came spectacularly to an end.